Next is the basic steps in the participatory stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement is the identification of a project's key stakeholders, an assessment of their interests, and the ways in which these interests affect the project riskiness and viability. According to Oakley, stakeholder analysis is a methodology for identifying and sorry, analyzing the key stakeholders in a project and planning for their participation. So it is therefore the starting point of most participatory process and provides foundation for the design of subsequent stakeholder activities through the project cycle. A thorough stakeholder analysis should be carried out in the early planning of a disaster risk reduction, reviewed and refined from time to time as the details of the program or project becomes more detailed and definite. So the fundamental step is first is to identify the key stakeholders. Second is to assess the stakeholder interest and the potential impact of the new initiative or subject of interest. Three is assess the stakeholder influence and the importance. Four is outline a stakeholder participation strategy. So first we are identifying the people, then assessing the interest of stakeholders, and then assessing the stakeholder influences and importance and outlining a participation strategy. Now, methods and tools for participatory stakeholder engagement: participatory meetings and workshops, panel discussions, pyramid schemes, debates, a round table, participatory research or data collection, semi-structured interviewing, ranking, trend and time analysis. These are the methods. The levels of stakeholder participation levels, you can see 1 to 6 levels. In designing the participatory process, the level of involvement of each stakeholder depending upon the given institutional framework differs and should be defined. Different levels would require involvement of different stakeholders. Experience shows that involving all the stakeholders to participate fully in all decision making stages is neither realistic nor useful in a given situation. Each stakeholder category has a specific role to play and can be said to have an orbit of influence with respect to a particular activity. So we can see the orbits as 1 to 6. First orbit, disaster management. Second orbits are the creators. Third, the advisors. Four, reviewers. Five, observers. And six is the unsuppressed apathetic. The decision makers are the center of the orbit of influence of the decision making process. Orbit 1 to 6 we have seen. Orbit 1 contains the stakeholders who are partners in the decision making. Final decisions must be made with their concurrence. Our orbit 2 features the creators who are deeply involved in the decision being made and in developing alternatives and are therefore constantly involved. Orbit 3 consists of advisors who are active but not constantly involved and are called upon periodically for advice. Orbit 4 features the reviewers, those who wish to be kept informed before a decision becomes a policy, rule, law, or fate accompli. However, they do not feel the need to be active throughout the process. Orbit 5 contains the observers. These are people who do not want to be surprised. They watch and react only if an issue occurs. And outer orbit holds those who are not seen in the process but who will react if they are suddenly surprised and felt threatened. Now we can see the pyramid from control to manipulation, control, delegated power, partnership, placation, consultation, informing, therapy, manipulation. So degrees of power, degrees of tokenism and non-participation. Accordingly, it is grouped. Basic steps in communication is forming of communicative intent, message composition, message encoding, transmission of signals, reception of signals and message decoding. Last is the interpretation. So effective communication includes non-verbal communication, engaged listening, managing stress in the moment, ability to communicate assertively and the capacity to recognize and understand your own emotion and those of the person who are communicating with you. So communication need not have any More explanation need not require any more explanation. Everybody know what is communication and what is effective communication. It enhances the provision of difficult messaging without creating conflicts. So steps for effective communication are: use standard terminology when communicating risk, disaster, coping, resilience, vulnerable, etc. And that we have learned in the first module regarding the terms in the disaster management. So effective communication, first step we have to use the standard terminologies. Request and provide clarification when needed to allow or encourage the beneficiary to respond to issues they are not sure of. The communicator should also be well informed about the situation of things within the community where the information is to be disseminated. Ensure statements are direct and unambiguous. Inform appropriate individuals when the mission or the plan changes. Communicate all the information needed by those individual or teams external to the team. Use non-verbal communication appropriately. Then we can look into the barriers for effective communication. Non-focus on the issue at the hand, not being attentive, avoiding interpretation or interruption, show interest in what is being said, avoid being judgmental but make provision for feedbacks, pay attention to non-verbal communications, be conscious of individual differences, keep stress in check but be assertive. So importance of communication in disaster risk reduction. Communication promotes preparedness for disaster, provides early warning signals of disaster, facilitates proper response to disaster. During and immediately after disaster situation is an important component. Communication during the occurrence and after the disaster is very important. And effective communication connects affected people, families, and communities with the first responders, support system, and other family members. Reliable and accessible communication and information system are also key to communities' resilience. So important things are communication. We all know. During a flood, we are first informed through the channel, or communication warning signals are all given, and properly we are passing it to the nearby people. Or also communication like help desk will be open immediately on a disaster, so that families and members affected can connect with the people who are far away. Disaster risk communication helps to provide the public with the information about the effects of disaster, how actions may affect the outcome of the disaster. In other words, it helps to inform the public about a potential disaster situation to enable people to make them inform about the disaster. So, main disaster research communication includes telephone calls, group meetings, mass media such as television, radio, internet, and interactive social media such as Twitter and Facebook, which pass the details regarding the disaster. Before disaster strike, telecommunication can be used as a conduit for disseminating information about the impending danger, thus making it possible for people to take necessary precautions and mitigate the impact of this hazard. Other telecommunication applications include remote sensing and GPS, which have critical roles to play in tracking approaching hazards, alerting authorities, warning, etc. That we have seen the hazard mapping topic.